For thousands of years, we've been taught one sacred truth. There is only one God, one Creator, one Yahweh. But what if that is only part of the story? Imagine, for a moment, that hidden within the very pages of the Bible, verses you've read countless times, there are clues pointing to another divine presence. Not an idol, not a fallen angel, but a second divine being who stood beside Yahweh from the very beginning. A presence whose fingerprints appear throughout Scripture, yet whose name remains unspoken. Most believers have never heard this perspective, and there is a good reason why. This is the part of Scripture many religious leaders avoid, because if it is true, it challenges the very foundation of monotheism. It suggests that from the dawn of creation, there may have been more than one divine presence at work. And the evidence? It begins with the very first sentence of the Bible. The clue in Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. A verse so familiar, it almost seems sacred in its simplicity. But in Hebrew, the original language, something extraordinary appears. The word used for God is Elohim, a grammatically plural noun. Not El, not Eloah, but Elohim, literally gods. And yet, the verb that follows, created, is singular. The Bible opens with a divine paradox. Gods created. Why would Scripture begin with this contradiction? Was it merely poetic? A linguistic tool? Or was it something deeper? A hidden truth, whispered through language that only the wise would recognize? Scholars have tried to smooth over this inconsistency by calling it the plural of majesty, a literary device meant to emphasize God's greatness. But that explanation quickly unravels when you discover that Elohim appears over 2,000 times in the Old Testament, and in many instances clearly refers to multiple beings. And then comes Genesis 1:26, where God says, "Let us make man in our image." Who is us? Who is our? The divine council. When God declared, "Let us make man in our image," it wasn't a slip of the tongue, nor was it mere poetic language. It was a deliberate plural declaration at the very heart of creation. For generations, theologians have attempted to contain this verse, to domesticate it. Some claimed God was addressing angels. Others insisted it was simply a royal we, used to signify majesty. But these theories do not withstand scrutiny. Angels are never described as creators in Scripture. Nowhere does the Bible say man was made in the image of angels. They are messengers, servants, even warriors, but never architects of life. And if God was merely speaking to himself, why use language so easily misunderstood, so openly plural? What if these words weren't meant to be misunderstood at all? What if this verse only confuses us because we have ignored what ancient readers already knew? Buried within the oldest layers of Hebrew thought lies a concept modern theology has tried to erase: the divine council, a heavenly assembly of spiritual beings, Elohim, who stood in Yahweh's presence, served under his authority, and participated in the governance of creation. In the ancient Near East, kings never ruled alone. They had councils, advisors, and princes who spoke with royal authority. If heaven mirrors earth, why would Yahweh, the king of all creation, be any different? The Bible itself offers glimpses of this council. In Job 1, the sons of God present themselves before the Lord. In 1 Kings 22, a spirit steps forward from the heavenly host to carry out divine judgment. And in Psalm 82, the veil is pulled back entirely. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Most translations hide this reality. The word Elohim, plural divine beings, is softened into judges or mighty ones. But the Hebrew is clear. God stands among gods, not idols, not metaphors, but real spiritual beings, real presences. And Yahweh is not threatened by them. He rules over them. These Elohim were not equal to Yahweh. They were created beings, subordinate but still divine in nature. According to Scripture, they were not silent, they were not passive. They witnessed creation. They participated in heavenly decisions. They had roles, until many rebelled. So when Genesis says, "Let us make man," it is not metaphor, but memory. a moment recorded in language older than doctrine, a glimpse into the inner workings of a world we were never meant to see. But if this council was present at the creation of humanity, what does that say about us? Were we created in the image of Yahweh alone, or were we shaped to reflect the entire divine assembly? A blend of purpose, a fusion of spirit, a reflection of more than one face and more than one will. This is the mystery few churches dare to address. Because if true, the Bible doesn't just speak of one divine presence at the beginning. It speaks of a throne surrounded by many and one voice among them that still echoes through eternity. The angel of the Lord. There is a figure who walks through the pages of the Old Testament like a shadow. He appears without warning. He speaks with divine authority. He performs miracles, commands armies, and accepts worship, yet he is never directly called Yahweh. The Bible calls him the angel of the Lord. But this title is deceptive because this angel is unlike any other. When ordinary angels appear in Scripture, they make it clear, "Do not worship me. I am only a servant." But the angel of the Lord never says this. Instead, he speaks as if he is God himself. When he appears to Hagar in the wilderness, he declares, "I will increase your descendants." Not God will, but I will. And the very next verse says, "It was the Lord who spoke to her." In Exodus 3, Moses encounters the burning bush. The text begins by saying, "The angel of the Lord appeared in flames of fire." But then, the voice that speaks from those flames is not that of an angel. It is the voice of Yahweh. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." This is not just a messenger. This is a presence, a voice that burns but is not consumed, a being distinct from Yahweh, yet somehow Yahweh himself. In Judges 13, the parents of Samson meet the angel of the Lord. They offer him a sacrifice. Fire ascends from the altar and the angel rises into the flame. In terror, they cry out, "We have seen God." Time and again, this mysterious being appears. He speaks, he blesses, he commands, but he never identifies himself as merely an angel. He acts as God in disguise. So what are we witnessing? A mere angel with special authority? Or a manifestation of Yahweh split into a second form? Some scholars suggest this is a theophany, a visible appearance of God in physical form. But that does not explain the separation. At times, the angel of the Lord speaks to Yahweh. At times, he is sent by Yahweh. How can Yahweh send himself? Unless this is not the Father, but another divine presence, one who carries the name, the authority, and the essence of God, yet remains distinct. A second power in heaven, a being without a name, but possessing all the attributes of the Most High. A being who walks between realms, who speaks with fire, and who may have been preparing for something far greater to come. King without beginning. Before the law, before the Levitical priesthood, before Moses descended from Sinai, there was a man, a king, a priest, a mystery. His name was Melchizedek. He appears suddenly in Genesis 14 after Abraham's victory in battle. No warning, no backstory. He steps into the narrative, blesses Abraham in the name of God Most High, receives a tithe from the Father of Nations, and just as suddenly vanishes. But it is not his brief appearance that unsettles scholars. It is what is said about him thousands of years later. The book of Hebrews reaches back and describes Melchizedek with words that defy human logic. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. What kind of man has no beginning? No end? No ancestry? No death? The ancient Jews revered genealogies. Bloodlines defined priesthood, inheritance, and identity. Yet Melchizedek stands outside all of it. He is a king of righteousness, a priest of the Most High, and somehow eternal. Even more troubling is the role he holds. In the Torah, no one could be both king and priest. These roles were divided. One held the sword, the other the incense. But Melchizedek holds both. He rules a city, Salem, later known as Jerusalem, and he offers bread and wine, a gesture that seems almost prophetic. So, who was he? Was Melchizedek just a man set apart by God for a unique task? Or was he something more, something otherworldly? The writer of Hebrews doesn't call him an angel or a prophet. He says Melchizedek resembles the Son of God, not just symbolically, but in essence, in form, in nature. Some early church fathers believed Melchizedek was the pre-incarnate Christ, appearing before Bethlehem, before the manger, before Mary ever whispered his name. Others thought he was a heavenly priest sent to earth, a divine figure cloaked in human form, hidden in the folds of history. There is one detail often overlooked. Melchizedek is never said to have died. He simply disappears. No grave, no farewell, no ending. And that is what makes him dangerous to tradition. Because if Melchizedek was truly eternal, then he was not just a priest, he was a presence, a divine witness walking among men, holding bread and wine long before the Last Supper, wearing a crown long before the cross. And if he never died, where is he now? A war between powers. If there were truly only one power in heaven, one uncontested throne, then Scripture should speak with perfect harmony, one voice, one will, one story. But it doesn't. Hidden within the Bible are moments that don't feel like commands from a single authority, but like echoes from a higher realm, one divided by conflict. A realm where more than one divine presence holds power, and where those powers do not always agree. In the book of Daniel, a strange scene unfolds. Daniel fasts and prays for 21 days, seeking a word from heaven. When an angel finally arrives, he offers a stunning explanation for the delay. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days, he says. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. What does this mean? That an angel sent by God was resisted, blocked, held back by another being with authority over a nation? This prince of Persia is not human. He exists in the heavenly realm. He delays the will of God. And Michael, called not just an angel, but a chief prince, is summoned to intervene. This is not metaphor. This is warfare in the unseen realm. A battle, not merely between good and evil, but between ruling powers, beings with territory, with rank, with mission. The Bible speaks of Yahweh as supreme, but it also hints that he is not alone in the spiritual government of the cosmos. In Psalm 82, we glimpse heaven's courtroom. Yahweh stands among other gods, Elohim, and judges them. You are gods, sons of the Most High, but you will die like mere men. These weren't statues. They were real beings, entrusted with authority over nations. And they failed. They became corrupt, unjust, hungry for worship. Even Deuteronomy dares to whisper this forbidden idea. In chapter 32, it says, "When the Most High divided the nations, he set the boundaries according to the number of the sons of God." In other words, he allotted the nations to lesser divine beings, spiritual rulers, while he chose Israel for himself. The nations were placed under their care, but many rebelled. They demanded sacrifices. They became the false gods of myth and legend, and Yahweh's patience grew thin. So what are we seeing? A clean hierarchy under one divine king, or a fractured realm where power was shared, abused, and eventually judged? And if Yahweh allowed this, why? Why would the Most High tolerate lesser gods ruling nations, spreading darkness, delaying his will? Unless it was all part of a deeper design. What if this wasn't just rebellion, but a setup for restoration? A cosmic divide that made way for a divine confrontation. A moment in history when a second figure, equal in glory yet cloaked in mystery, would descend into the realm of corrupt powers. Not to conquer with force, but to overturn the throne of darkness with something far more dangerous: humility. Because sometimes, the greatest war isn't fought in the heavens, it's fought in flesh, on dusty roads, in silence, with blood. And the gods who ruled in pride never saw it coming. The second God revealed. We followed a thread barely visible to the eye, a whisper woven through centuries of scripture, from the plural name Elohim to a divine council hidden in plain sight. From a nameless angel who speaks as God to a priest king without beginning or end. From a war among heavenly powers to thrones shaken by judgment. And now, one question remains. Was there truly another God in the Bible? One who walked beside Yahweh, yet was not a rival? Not a second God in opposition, but a second presence, eternal, divine, one with Yahweh, yet distinct enough to be seen, to be heard, to be sent. The Gospel of John opens with a sentence that gathers every shadow we've traced and floods it with light. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. A presence that is both with God and is God. This is not poetry, it is revelation. Because all throughout the Old Testament, this presence keeps returning, sometimes as a voice in the fire, sometimes as a warrior, sometimes as a priest, always as one who carries divine authority. He forgives sins, he accepts worship, he speaks in the first person as Yahweh himself. And yet, he is sent, he appears, he disappears. He is both known and unknown. Some say it was an angel, others a theophany. But the early church fathers believed something far more profound, that this was not merely a manifestation of God, it was Christ himself before the incarnation, not in flesh, not born of Mary, but already alive, already moving, a divine figure who was there from the beginning, walking beside the Most High, yet cloaked in mystery. This is why Jesus could say, "Before Abraham was, I am." It wasn't blasphemy, it was memory. He wasn't claiming to be just another prophet. He was revealing that he had always been the one who spoke to them. He was the angel who wrestled with Jacob, the fire that did not consume the bush, the fourth man in the furnace, the Melchizedek who offered bread and wine before the law even existed, the commander of heaven's army, unseen, but always present. And when the time came, he stepped down into a world ruled by rebellious gods, not to seize power, but to surrender, not with thunder, but with blood. Because the second God was never truly second. He was the Word, the arm of the Lord, the face of God that could be seen, the one who created with Yahweh, the one who bore the image in which we were made. He was not hidden. We just weren't ready to see him, the tapestry of revelation. The Bible is not just a collection of stories. It is a tapestry of revelation, one that grows deeper, richer, more complex with every thread we uncover. The truth about God's nature doesn't diminish his glory, it magnifies it. It shows us that from the very beginning, the Creator was not a solitary king, but a communion of divine love and purpose. And perhaps that's why we were made in their image, because we too were created for communion, for relationship, for a love that transcends understanding. The second God was not added to Scripture as an afterthought. He was there from in the beginning, working, speaking, revealing, preparing, until the moment came for him to be revealed, not just as divine, but as fully human. The mystery of the Godhead is not a puzzle to be solved, but a wonder to be embraced. A truth that reminds us that the God who made the cosmos is greater, more magnificent, more relational than we ever dared imagine. And if Christ was always there, the eternal Word, the divine presence beside the Father, then he knows us more intimately than we know ourselves. He shaped the dust from which we came. He breathed the breath that gave us life. And he surrendered it all to become like us so that we might become like him. The second God was never about dividing our worship or confusing our faith. He was about completing the picture of who God has always been. A God who creates through relationship, a God who redeems through sacrifice, a God who has always been reaching toward us, even before we knew his name, even before we were ready to see his face.